Joining us. Welcome, welcome. I hope you're having a great day so far. My name is Sierra Pratt. I am the marketing manager at Star Staffing. I'm excited to be with you today, and we'll be moderating this webinar. I'd also like to take a moment to welcome our speaker, Dr. Craig Nathanson. Good morning.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us.
I'll be introducing him a little bit more officially in just a few minutes. So quickly, I wanted to share that Star Staffing offers a monthly e-newsletter specifically for HR professionals. If you're interested in subscribing, you can learn more about it at starhr.com/hrcaffeine or email me directly to be added to the distribution list. I'd be happy to include you in this month's email. It will be going out on Sunday. It's our goal that you not just survive in HR, but thrive. And if you're not an HR professional, but you're still interested, that's totally fine as well. But it is kind of HR geared, so just keep that in mind. And of course, I want to invite you to save the date for part 2 of this leadership series with Dr. Craig Nathanson, which will continue on July 28th, so in 2 weeks. He will be discussing how to be a humanistic leader, so register and save your spot at starhr.com/webinars. It's now my pleasure to introduce today's speaker. Dr. Craig Nathanson is the program coordinator for the Human Resource Management Certificate Program at Sonoma State University, managing 2 certificate programs, and he's also an adjunct lecturer in the School of Business and Economics. Dr. Nathanson has been teaching online graduate and undergraduate programs since 2001 and at several universities in North America and Europe, and also he is a visiting lecturer at educational institutes including Vietnam, Belgium, and China. He has a PhD in Human and Organizational Systems, as well as a master's degree in Human Development and Telecommunications Management, and has over 20 years experience working with Fortune 500 companies. Dr. Nathanson has written and published 7 books on personal and midlife development and management, including The Best Manager, Getting Better Results Through People, and Dr. Nathanson's book, Joyful Work in Midlife, The 5 Stages, accumulates 20 years of research in the intersection of world and midlife. And there's so much more, but we'll stop there and welcome Dr. Nathanson. We're excited to learn from you today, and I'm gonna go ahead and stop my share and we'll welcome you.
Great. Thank you so much, Sierra. And I just want to start out and say, thank you all for, taking time from your busy schedules. I really have 2 objectives for you, after this short talk. One is that you start to think, maybe a little bit deeper about, what is it that you would really love to do? What is your vocation? And how do you start to enhance or move towards doing, what you love in your work? And 2, if you work with other people, maybe you'll get just a few ideas. It just takes a new distinction to move people in a new direction. So those are my goals. This is a topic I love speaking about. I've been researching this 25 years, and it's between this and humanistic leadership. I mean, this is my life's work. I really think that the world would be a better place, especially now, if we just were able to, do what we love. And so with that, I'm going to share my screen. And we'll talk as we go. Feel free to ask questions. Sierra will be monitoring the chat since I can't see those.
Yes, and you can send them in either through the Q&A or chat. I'll watch them both. So whatever you feel comfortable sharing with it works for me.
Great, super. This material will be made available to you after. So Sierra will let you know how to get all of this information. So let's start out. So, what is this joyful work? Well, let me just say it's very subjective. I think if you have joyful work when it's Sunday night, you go to bed and you just toss and turn all night. You can't wait to get up in the morning. You say, is it time to get up yet? It's only 2 a.m. And at 4 a.m., is it time to get up yet? And finally, you just get up because you're so excited, you can't wait to go to work. With joyful work, you can't tell the difference between Monday and Friday, work and play, vocation and vocation. It's all the same, right? On the other hand, if you don't have joyful work, this might seem familiar. You work all week long, and we have these names for work that we don't like. We have Monday blues and Wednesday hump day. And a student told me recently there's, what's the name on Tuesday? I don't know. There's a name on Tuesday. Maybe it's almost Wednesday. Thursday is almost Friday. Friday is, thank God it's Friday, and so on. So we work all week, and then if you don't like your work, Friday night is fun. You go out and have some fun. Hopefully not now. Saturday, you run errands. And Sunday's okay, you sleep in, and about 1 o'clock on Sunday, uh, if you don't enjoy your work, you start thinking about it. And the rest of Sunday, no matter what you're doing, you're thinking about Monday. And so that's just a little test that, I find is interesting to do. So joyful work is when you have, you're happy, this happiness word, you have more energy and bounce in your step. You don't really think about money. By the way, my definition of work is doing what you love for most of the day and for most of your life. I'll repeat that: doing what you love for most of the day, for most of your life. And of course, we all need to make money, but it's better to focus first on what it is that you really want to do so that you could do it your whole life. I mean, once you start to do what you love, there is no word to retire, the French word for just move fast and then stop. In other words, once you find vocation, once you find work that you really love to do, there's really no need to stop. So joyful work is where it just feels right. It feels like a new shirt, a new blouse. It's just like it feels right to you. It feels authentic. When you have joyful work, Monday is usually the best day of the week, and Friday's a kind of not maybe the worst because in some cases you have to wait till Monday to continue. As I'll talk about in a moment, you feel internally motivated. Internal motivation is much better than external motivation. I mean, we all like pats on the back, and we like rewards and people to say, I like you and good job. But the best rewards, are the ones that you give yourself. So you get the idea here. This should be enough incentive for you. Joyful work is important. You know this. I'm just repeating this. What you already know. I mean, we're going to spend over a third of our life working or more. And as we start, the average age in America, the lifespan in 1910 was maybe 43, and we've almost doubled that today. And it continues to grow. And some experts say that a child born in 2020 will live well over 100 years old. So the idea of just working for part of our life and stopping, I think, no longer makes sense. But work is important. It influences our sense of self, our self-esteem, who we are. It influences how we spend our money, how we make our money. When you do what you love, every dollar that you make, you cherish and you spend it wisely. But when you make money doing just a job, you spend it quickly because that's the only reward that you have. One of the benefits, if you're a parent, I have 4 kids, is that when you love your work, your children will grow up to look forward to their work. And the opposite is true. When you come home every night just in a bad mood and complaining about your work, your kids will be like, oh, that's not something I want to do. So work is important. It's important our whole life, but it influences pretty much every aspect of our life. And if you haven't noticed, the world of work is changing. And people, and this was before the pandemic, by the way, people, in society are starting to want more control of their work. They want to know why they're working on things, like why, it doesn't relate to their values. People want to know and have more control over what they work on and where they work and how they work and when they work and so on. It's expected that, in a few short years that 50% of Americans will work independently. I call this the Hollywood model. In Hollywood, you have many experts and they work on different things, and they get hired on Monday to work for a few hours and Tuesday to work for someone else, and maybe they have their own company. And I call this the portfolio life, and I'll talk more about this later, but this is kind of where we're moving quickly. Companies now today are starting to hire experts as needed. We see this during the pandemic, and when they're not needed, they're let go. They're scaling to meet demand and so on. Companies are requiring a lot less physical space. So there's a lot of change. That's my point. That's happening in work. The new generation, Generation Z, those adults, 18 to 24, have really grown up with this idea of kind of scrolling for things. And in the not too distant future, if you have children under 10, when they become adults, this is how it'll work. They'll probably wake up on Monday, maybe they'll do this on Sunday, and they'll start scrolling for opportunities that meet what their schedule looks like. Tuesday I'm going to do this, and Wednesday I'm going to focus on my own company, and Thursday I'm going to be a contractor over here. And so this portfolio life is starting to catch on, and it's obviously enabled by technology. I've listed a few of my favorite freelance platforms. There are literally hundreds of platforms today where you can post work or go seek work. And the biggest shift, I think, to kind of get your head around is that full-time jobs are no longer as secure as freelance work. And let me just say, I am not saying no one should have a full-time job, a traditional job. I'm just saying it's important to start to expand your thinking around work and how you might take different pieces of your passions and put them together. Talk more about that in a moment. These days, it's a typical question that a Gen Zer might ask in an interview. The interview is asking questions, and he or she is through, and the candidate says, "Okay, why should I work here? And how will you enable me to have meaning in my work here?" And for the interviewer, the HR professional, the manager that can't answer that question, this person's not going to be interested. So, that's a question I'm starting to see. So that's why it's important that companies really have a great employer brand. I think in some ways, HR professionals today really need to move to start being marketeers, and that is to start to market why the organization is a great place to work and why people will find joyful work there. I also think, by the way, that of all the business indicators that there are, and of course they're all important, stock price, cost of goods, customer acquisition, and so on. But I think the number one indicator to measure at work is the amount of joy people have. Because when joy goes up, all other business indicators go up. And so I've had people say to me, "Well, Dr. Nathanson, you can't measure that. It's too wishy-washy." Of course you can. You simply ask people. And if there's trust, they'll answer this question. You ask people, "Do you enjoy your work? If yes, why? So I could help support you on this. Or if no, why not?" And so that gives you some good data to work with. But the bottom line is, from my research over the years, people, and this, I'm sure yourself, that people really do their best work, when they're joyful, when they're happy. I also want to mention at the bottom of the slide here that when people do their best work, they tend to feel more like partners in the organization and not employees. And I think that's important. Any CEO would say, "I want my people to work hard and long and feel like they're committed." Well, that happens when they're enjoying their work. When they're not, the opposite is true. So what elements need to be in place to really enjoy your work? Think back to when you were a small child. And I'll probably date myself here, but when I was a small child, I remember we had recess in third, fourth grade, and we'd go out on the playground and we just had fun, right? I played kickball, and we played different sports and jumping jacks, and we just played all over the schoolyard until this bell rang. And when I went to school, we had a teacher that was out with a huge bell, and as soon as you started doing this, it was very sad because that meant we had to freeze and playtime was over. I mention this story because I think the same thing is true for us as adults. We need to be able to play and enjoy our lives and enjoy our work before that final bell rings. And that means you really have to have a deep self-awareness of, what is your purpose in life? That's a very esoteric question. But one way to think about your purpose is, where is your energy right now? Where do you want to make a difference in the world? What bothers you, and where do you want to make a difference? And then how do you align that to your most important values? On your own, you might make a list of the top 3 to 5 values. Like, what's most important to you in your life? What do you think is most important? And then how do you know if you're following, what's most important? And how do you know if you're not? In my research, I find that most people spend about 80% of their day doing things that have nothing to do with what's most important to them. And then they wonder why they're unhappy and so on. So it's important to align your purpose and your values and your behaviors and your goals. One nice thing to do is to see if you could create some, long-term, medium-term, and short-term goals that match your values. That becomes your roadmap for your life. I'll talk more about that in a moment. to have joyful work, you have to have a nice team around you. You know, if you don't have a supportive team, that's not going to help. So that's important. There are 4 words that I think are really important to consider when it comes to joyful work. One is significance. You have to ask yourself, you know, is my work significant? And it's very subjective. Only you can answer that. Coherence means, is it clear to me why I'm doing this? Like, it's clear to me why I'm giving this talk. This is what I do. This is my life's work. But you have to ask yourself, is it clear to you why you're doing what you do? And I don't mean because you're paid or because you have a nice office or a window or a title or 20 people work for you, but you know, does it really align to your purpose and your values? Does your work give you meaning? I think people would rather talk about their romantic lives at work before talking about, wow, I'm really happy here. This gives me meaning. You know, you have to decide, does your work give you meaning? And, you know, I can't answer that for you. It's very subjective. And finally, fulfillment. You know, here in Sonoma County, it's a very hot day. It'll be a hot day. Imagine you went out and got an ice cream and you're licking that ice cream and it's, oh yeah, it's so good. This is how work should taste, just like that ice cream cone. So you have to feel fulfilled for joyful work to occur. If I had just 30 seconds to give you one exercise to cut to the chase, to find your joyful work, I would say to take a piece of paper, and on the left-hand side is to make a list of your abilities. So things that you're good at, you know, but you're motivated to do. For example, in my office here, you can't see it. I have this like little smoke alarm thing, and it keeps, I disabled it for today, but it keeps beeping. You know, it needs to have a battery change. I know how to change it, right? I get a ladder, I climb up, change the battery, but I'm kind of lazy and I haven't done it. So just because you know how to do something, if you're not motivated, you know, you shouldn't do it. I like to tell my students, the wrong reason to take a job is because you're good at it. You must enjoy it. So on the left side of the piece of paper, you make a list of all the things that you're good at. And on the right side, you make a list of your deep interest. You know, I call this the bookstore test. If I sent you to a bookstore today, and there's not many of them left, a physical bookstore, think about for a moment, you know, what part of the bookstore would you go to? Because that shows me where your deep interests are at this point of your life. And you will go to different parts of the bookstore, you know, during different parts of your life. So you make a list of your deep interest, and then here's the secret to joyful work. So you go through and you start to match, you know, you sort of match the abilities and interests, and it's the intersection of abilities and interests. I think that's where joyful work is. It's better to be interested in something and not know how to do it, but because you're motivated, you might have incentive to learn, right? Then to be really good at something, but have no interest. And so I think this is an interesting exercise for people to do. At the end of the day, you have to give yourself permission. No one's gonna, with all due respect, no one from HR is gonna run up to you on Monday and say, hi, Craig, we're from HR. We're doing a survey on Authentic Life. And we wanna know if you're loving your work. It's a new part of our program with the 401k. By the way, I wish that would happen, but it's probably not gonna happen. Your family members, you know, they love you the way you are, that you are. They're not gonna, they like to see you go to work and come home, hopefully happy. But when you get home, they're probably not going to say, hey, Craig, did you find purpose in your life today? No, they're going to say, did you throw out the garbage? Did you do this? Did you do that? And so at the end of the day, it's important to give ourselves permission, because if we're not happy in our work, then those around us won't be happy as well. So I developed a model. It's called the Joyful Work Model. I'm just going to briefly show you this. If you go on my website, you know, I have lots of resources to learn about this, and I have a workshop I'll refer to later. But there's 3 models here, and I've kind of put them together. One model is called, by the way, I'll pause after this if there's questions. I get on a roll. I can go all night on this. So first, I learned that most of us are on what's called stage 1, which is a treadmill in life. You know, have you ever been on a treadmill? If you've been on a treadmill, you know, we don't do it because we like it. We do it because we want to get in shape. We do it, you know, treadmill is usually kind of boring, right? We do it because we have to. So most of us, for most of our lives, stay on this treadmill. And then something happens. Imagine you're on the treadmill and somebody interesting walks by, and you kind of look at them, and then you kind of fall off the treadmill. Well, that's what happens in life. We have things happen to us that make us uncomfortable. It could be something as simple as, you're late to work. It could be a death in the family. It could be a financial calamity, an illness, a divorce. Sadly, a large percentage of people, 50% of Americans, get divorced after 7 years. This is a common thing because people grow in different directions and they don't support each other. Lots of things happen, right? So those are trigger events. So when something happens to you uncomfortable in your life that you consider bad, it's important to take that time and go to stage 3, which I call reflection. A lot of us say, wow, that was difficult, that hurt, and I go back to the treadmill. So in life, when something happens, it's important to reflect, and I'll show you what to do with that in a moment. And then from reflection, we're able to push through change. And usually, if you don't make a big change in life, it's sort of hard to move towards joyful work. I've found you have to kind of jump in with both feet. And that, if we see the change through, we can end up in what I call a new beginning, where life is amazing. You just want to pinch yourself. You love every minute of every day, and it's focused around your work. You go to Thanksgiving dinner and you see this aunt that you can't stand because she talks too much, and all of a sudden you like her too. So the question is, how do you do reflection? And there's a second model I developed 20 years ago, which I call the 10P model. I wrote a book on this. It's my first book. And there's lots of ways to build a roadmap for your life. This is just an example of one way. The culmination of this wheel is what I call your perfect vocational day. In other words, if you could just envision what a perfect day would be for you in terms of your work, from the time you get up in the morning to the time you go to sleep, what would that day be like? Where would you go? What would you do? And so on. And so this wheel allows you to answer many, many questions, and then put a map up on your wall, which becomes your roadmap. Purpose in life, prizes, your values. What do you value most? Perspective. How do you feel about you? What's possible in your life? A lot of us look at what's impossible. Your mind can't tell the difference between what's real and what's imagined when you think about the future. So it's important to focus your mind towards what you want versus what you don't want. A lot of us, we focus on what we don't want, and we end up with just more of what we don't want. Place has to do with your role in the world. What is your role in the world? Like, what do you think you're meant to do? You probably have some ideas. Position is attitude. What work would give you a great attitude, for your whole life? Passion, my favorite. What are you passionate about? What would you do for free? If you had 7 hours free on Saturday, where do you spend your time? Perfect vocational day. And present, what do you do in the present to move towards joyful work? And there's 3 things that have to be overcome: money and emotions. You have to be strong emotionally, and you have to have good relationships. And in my work, I see a lot more about that. And then finally, at the end of the day, permission. So the idea here is to build a roadmap for your life. A few years ago, I realized that many people would get all excited, they would do this, but they wouldn't know how to implement this. And so I developed one more piece of this model, which I call the 8 steps model. I'm not sure why I didn't call it 10 steps. And I won't go through all the steps, but you can kind of look at this. I mean, I think I wrote a book, in fact, on this model because I think that this works for getting to any of your goals, let alone joyful work. It works in both ways. And most people can't get by step 1, which is to envision. If you want something in your life, especially joyful work, and you can't envision what your life will be like, if you can't see a picture of what your life will be like when you get to this goal, then really we're not motivated to take any action. So, but if we can do that, it's important to write it down. When you write things down, you know that you externalize it. When you talk to others, you start to believe in yourself. Of course, this big change is important, as is building up a support network. And of course, daily small steps are important. Maybe right now you're in a job that you need for survival. I get that, and especially during the pandemic, and you're not very happy, and you're tired at the end of the day. Well, just before bed, take 5 minutes to read an article, write something, do some research on something that you enjoy, and you will start to build that vocational muscle. Vocational passion, which I trademarked this term, I'm not sure why, back in 2001. It's like a muscle. If you don't use it, you lose it. And then you have to measure your progress. If you want to lose weight, on Monday, you see how much you weigh. On Tuesday, you weigh yourself, and then you ask yourself, if you went up or down, what did you do? So it's important to measure progress and then, of course, celebrate. And so this is the joyful work, a joyful work model. And yeah, in a moment, I'll show you what you could, a little bit more you can do with this. So what else can individuals do to enable joyful work? Maybe I should pause because I feel like there might be some questions, Sarah.
Yes, that would be great. We do have a
I
question.
can't see everybody, so it's so easy for me just to keep talking.
Yes, I'll try to pop on too if there's more questions coming in. We do have a question. As an HR professional, what are the tools out there to measure joyful work for individuals? For example, an employee satisfaction survey, in order for managers to assess talents wisely at work. This measure is very important. How can we include this element in an employee survey?
Yeah, great question. Let's see. Two things. I think the manual way is simply to ask people, you know, Sierra, do you enjoy your work? Yes. Would you, and this assumes, by the way, that there's trust built up in the environment. If not, that has to be built. But I think to ask and to do something with that information is important if the answer is yes or no. As far as tools, and if someone would like to write me, craignathanson@gmail.com, I'll send you a list of the tools I'm aware of that are being used now. They have there's so many platforms for pulse surveys now, where you could send out a survey, as often as you like, asking many questions. It's not so dissimilar from if we did a poll right now in Zoom. And so the good news is there is a lot of technology. If you email me, I'm happy to give you the list of the top 5 that I would recommend. So there's a lot of technology that can help us. But I still think the manual process is free and it builds trust and it's better.
Okay, great. And we can include the email address for Dr. Nathanson in the follow-up tomorrow. So you can look out for that. We'll be sure to make sure you have that. And let's see if there's any other that have come in right now. I think that's it for now. So we'll keep going and I'll pop back in when we get some more questions. Okay,
I'll remember to pause. So what can you do to enable your own joyful work or to help others? I about 6 months ago decided to put my life's work into a 90-minute workshop. And I just want you to know, if you want to build your own roadmap, if you go to the udemyplatform.com and enter in how to have joyful work course, there's actually a link in the last slide. You could take my course and build your own roadmap. The course, it varies between $10 and free, so it's really not expensive. But this is where I put my life's work to really help people. We talked about aligning abilities and interests. We talked about aligning values. We talked about many of these. I think if we focus near the end of the page and we look at internal motivation, I said this earlier, it's a lot of what we do in life is both motivated internally and externally. But the more you practice internally motivating yourself, it becomes a habit. This guy Moore in the 1960s said that anything that we do 7 times in a row becomes a habit. So if you want to smoke, if you want to stop smoking, every time you go to reach a cigarette, you do something else, 7 times in a row. Well, the same thing is true for internal motivation. The more we rely on our own happiness, our own ideas, our own intuition, we will make more progress towards joyful work. So let's maybe look at this from the HR perspective, from the organizational leadership perspective. Again, I think asking people, which no one ever does, by the way, do you enjoy the work? And because people typically are intimidated, they're afraid to answer that. This is why the ideas of humanistic leadership is so important, because if trust is not built up into the organization, people aren't going to answer this. Sarah, was there another question that came in? Okay.
Yes, there was. Sorry. We do have one question. In your experience, how significant is an individual's direct manager in finding joyful work? That's a good one.
Such a big influence. In my research, one of the reasons for most people not liking their work is because of poor managers. And so that's a great lead-in for the webinar in 2 weeks. I think it's so important to be a humanistic leader. For all kinds of reasons, from saving the planet, right, all the way down to being a better parent, but somewhere in the middle, when we are humanistic leaders and we really put people over profit first, I think trust is built and people are able to answer these kinds of questions. So I think it's important. I'm sorry, was there another question?
We're good for now.
there's a lot of technology, as we spoke about earlier, that could enable, um, managers to work closer with their people. I think it's important to provide more independence, to the extent that you can, of course, based on what the work that is being done requires. I do think it's extremely important to drop the old controlling management behavior. In fact, I think because so many of us have had to work at home, it's made um, the people that tend to have so I'll just say kind of autocratic management styles uncomfortable. But in some ways, it's probably a good thing, because the more we can trust people and drop some of those old behaviors, I think is important. Google in 2012 had a project called Aristotle, and the idea was to understand group norms. It was to understand how people work together, right? And there was a lot of things that came out of that study, and one of the things that I found most interesting was to create what Google called social sensitivity, which is in the culture, in the environment, starting to help people understand each other a lot more as humans, as people. The pandemic has placed a lot of pressure on us, and it's very possible that many people, will never go back to the office. A lot of us spend our days on Zoom. I know I do. And, in some ways, I think it's good, because it's increased what I call more empathy and humanity towards people. In the olden days, if you had a webinar and you saw someone's child running around the background, you would be like, oh, that's kind of annoying. But now it's kind of cozy. We all have a kitchen sink behind us, or a fake tree behind us. To try to, but it's brought us, I think, closer together. On the other hand, there is what I call Zoom fatigue happening. And I think we have to be careful with that. I think a lot of managers who micromanage tend to schedule too many Zoom meetings to check in on people. It's no different than interrupting people in their office every 5 minutes so no one gets anything done. And so I think we have to be careful. I think it's important to schedule Zoom meetings, as an example, just like you would schedule normal meetings, and not just assume it's everybody's free all the time. I can't tell you how many days I have 7 people trying to have meetings with me at the same time. It's just not possible. So the workday is getting longer, and we just, we have to be careful to avoid burnout as we go through the pandemic here. I think it's important for organizations to provide more social safety nets, which of course we're seeing, which is good. I do think that HR is going to be key in facilitating more of these partnerships, more of these, arrangements. I won't read this whole list. You could read. I do think it's important, though, to focus more on results with people versus, time spent in the office. Studies have shown that when it's really that it goes back to Greek mythology, when Pygmalion effect, when you believe in people, they will rise to your expectations. And when you don't believe in people, they will lower to your expectations. And so how we treat people, especially now when they're working at home, is really important. I think we need to shift from what's a critical role to what's a critical skill. And I'm seeing, which is a good thing, that more human skills are on the rise. Creativity, interdisciplinary skills. That's why it's important I've always said it's important to rotate people who want to be rotated. And, we always have these rules. Well, you can't be a marketing person, you're an HR person. And you can't go to HR, you're a marketing person. But as we learn to rotate people around, new perspectives in the organization grow, and new critical thinking skills grow. Critical thinking isn't just for the academic world. It means giving people the ability to start to look at things from different perspectives, and then they're more valuable to the organization. At work, people are really requiring, as I said earlier, a lot of it is driven by the younger generation. A third of our workforce, or more if you include the millenniums up till age 34, are driving these human connections. They grew up on their smartphones, and, collaboration is the way to go. So more and more people want just meaning in their work, and, voices in decision-making and flexibility, and so on. So I see a movement towards, what I call a more coaching model. To be a great humanistic leader, I think you have to be, this is a commercial for 2 weeks from now. You have to be a great leader, which is a vision. But the opposite of leading is managing, which is the structure part, the status quo. But you need both, and they have to come from the same person. And lastly, you have to be a good coach, which is really leading people to where you want them to go, being able to ask good questions. And our management education is focused on management, because of our capitalistic system. But we need to start to develop more coaches. Socrates, over 1,000 years ago, would just ask a question. We call it the Socratic method. And he would listen for the answer, and he would ask another question, leading the person to where he wanted them to go. And essentially, at the end of the day, that's coaching. It's really being humanistic, putting people first, caring about people, and not rushing to give them the answer, but asking questions. And so I think, especially during a crisis, which we have now around the world, this is a great time to put more emphasis on coaching, right? We're not widgets. We not only have lives and families outside of work, but we're all in this thing together, called COVID-19. And so more and more companies then are shifting to team-based models, team-based compensation, which I think is a great thing to do. I always have said, which many have disagreed with me, pay people competitive. But once they're in the organization, increases should only be based on team performance. If you want people to collaborate. If you want people to compete and have one winner and many losers, then have a focus on individual performance-based systems. But of course, that's another discussion for another time. So we're in a paradigm shift. What is a paradigm? Thomas Kuhn in 1962 said that an important change that happens when the usual way of thinking about something is replaced for a new and different way. And so we are in a paradigm shift right now because of the pandemic in terms of how we work, which I think is a good thing. But we're seeing, physical offices on the decline. We're seeing a lot of people, depressed. This is uncomfortable to them. We're seeing more companies with a need to hire, health workers. Telemedicine is an area that's just booming right now. So I think, as I like to say, the companies need to shift from being recession-proof now to pandemic-proof. I think it's important for leaders and HR professionals, just to make sure they're not treating adults as children at work. When we do that, people feel like they're in job prison. Let everyone work fairly. So if we're going to have a work-at-home policy, which of course we do now, it should be fair. Not to be critical, although obviously I am because it's up here. Some companies such as Facebook have said, yeah, we're going to have a large portion of our employees, work at home forever, but only based on their latest performance review. So, don't treat adults as children at work. Now, some employers, because of technology, I've seen have gone the wrong direction. There are tools now that could pretty much measure everything from bathroom breaks to computer usage and so on. And I think it's really important, especially now, to kind of, with all due respect, push those tools aside and avoid the urge to micromanage. As I said earlier, the interview questions are shifting. So tell me, why should I work here? How will you enable me to have meaning in my work? For the younger generation, they just as soon, believe me, I know about this, stay on their parents' couch until something else better comes along. Was there a question, Sierra?
No, actually, just to shout out that they're really loving this, really loving this session. So we're good for now. Thanks for checking though.
Thank you. The sadness for me is I couldn't talk to you all day. Always rushed against time. So I think for you, it's important. I'm looking at all of you right now. Don't ignore the signals that work has become routine and stagnant for you. These are my favorite 5 questions that I would suggest you take. Go out on the beach, take a walk, and ask yourself, what is my life really about? Who am I? I am a person who. And if you don't like the answer, you could change it. What do I want in my life? It's important to be selfish, especially for those of you, over 35 who've had some experience. And it's just as important for those of you under 35 to be a little selfish and ask yourself, what do I want? How do I get there? And, how do I really move towards my own joyful work? I'm going to wrap up so I can take some questions. I think through a common crisis, I really believe this, that we've found something around the world. It's kind of amazing that we didn't have before. I'm a professor. I teach at many different colleges, and I've been teaching online for 16 years. I have probably 500 students a day from I don't know, 50 countries. I students from all over through a lot of my international colleges I teach at. And I can tell you that the things that people are saying it's amazing. You know, I had a student this morning in Nigeria who was telling me that she hopes that they allow them to go to the grocery store soon. And, you know, in the US, we tend to be pretty American centric, but we're forgetting that we're all in the same boat here. And so I think with the right innovation, you know, we can transition to a more humane world of working together and apart. And but at the end of the day, we all have the right to joyful work. Have big dreams. It's just as easy to have big dreams, you know, as it is to have small dreams, because your mind can't tell the difference between what's real and what's imagined, you know, when you think of the future. So I'll leave you with that thought. I have a few minutes, Sierra, so maybe I could take some.
Okay, so.
Oh, I'm sorry. Could I do my last slide? I forgot.
Yes, of course.
I don't really market myself too much, so that's evidenced by the fact that I forgot this last slide. If you want to learn more about my work, my online community at drcraignathanson.com, I've had for about 20 years, and I have most of it's free. I have articles and podcasts and videos and Q&A forums, and I have a lot of stuff. I've given you a link to this workshop that I have now at Udemy, where you could build your own roadmap for your life. You could reach me at Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube. I update those social media platforms every single day with a new idea. And lastly, I manage and coordinate the HR programs, certificate programs at Sonoma State. We have a traditional 12-week program, which will be online this fall. If you want to get your HR certificate and allow you to pass the SHRM test and so on. And then I have a new program that I'll be teaching myself. It's an 8-week online, 100% online program. You learn at your own pace. But we will be focused on specific areas in HR that I think are really important now, in terms of the ways of work, HR technology, the future of HR, how HR can work with people during the pandemic. And so if you're interested in working with me over an 8-week period of all of this, feel free to join. The program starts at the end of August, and I've given you a link. Okay, now I'll stop my screen, and I'm all yours here.
Okay, so if you have questions, you can send them on in. We do have some thank yous coming in for the great session. So just as a reminder, we do have the follow-up session with Dr. Nathanson on the 28th. Yes, that is a Tuesday, so not next week, but the following week will be part 2 of this series. And so he will be leading that one as well. So I know a lot of people have been asking about that. You can register now. It's up online at starhr.com/webinars. So make sure that you sign up for that. I actually have a question. I saw, or in the beginning you talked about, you know, people want more control over their own work. So I'm wondering, I know we have a lot of people in on the webinar that work for companies that have like repetitive positions like warehouse and production. So what are some ways that you see being able to give them some more control, or things that you could, you know, would help them have more ownership?
Yeah, I mean, this is a question that I've gotten for 20 years, so way before the pandemic. At points in our life, we will all have to do some work, especially when we're starting out, to make money that we don't enjoy. But even for the person, even when you're doing that work, it is important to have a roadmap for your life so that you can rationalize how this work fits into the next step. If you have a job that you can't stand and it's not associated with the content that you enjoy, maybe you work in high tech and it's a kind of an entry-level job, you don't even like high tech, you love animals. Well, then transfer to the same entry-level job in the animal industry. So you're around content that people are talking about, you know, that you're interested in. So as an individual, despite your conditions, right, there is so much you can do. From the organizational side, as I spoke today, the more you can give people autonomy in their work. You know, I was a senior manager at Intel for many years, and I remember once the janitor came to me and said, "How come, Craig, we never get to come to your meetings?" And I never thought of that. So I said, "I want you to come to the next meeting and put up a graph showing me how much square feet of floor you clean every night." And then, make a long story short, the person came, showed us a graph which someone helped him put together. And he said, "You know, if you gave me permission to buy this this lemon oil, I could put it on the bathroom floors and it would make the bathroom smell better." And I said, "Of course." And from that day on, anyway, he did, and people, you know, were happy, and he was proud. And from that day on, I invited all janitors to the operational meetings, you know, these management meetings every month. So from the organizational side, there's a lot you can do to give people autonomy, to show them you care about them, to trust them, and so on. And so I think there's a lot that can be done.
Great. We do have a question. So if you have a more controlling manager that doesn't really exude joyful work, how do you handle that? Or what are some tips that you could share?
Two answers. One, wait a year, because either they'll go or you'll go. Maybe that's not the answer you wanted. On a more practical level, come back in 2 weeks. I'll teach you how to be a coach. You can coach up. You can coach your manager. I think the best thing to do is sit down face to face, look that person in the eye and say, Mary or Bob, when you say these things to me, when you act this way, when you treat me this way, it must be done in private or this won't work. This is how it makes me feel. And this is how it affects me at work. And I would appreciate it if you didn't do that. I would say about 50% of the time, if the person has a little bit of self-awareness, this will solve this problem. For the person that's not self-aware, quite frankly, there's not much you can do. But like I say, you have to provide that transition plan for yourself.
Great. We do have a couple more minutes if anybody else has any questions. I will go ahead and just share Craig's contact information up here in case you want to write that down very quickly. Here we go. So here is the website as well as email. And again, I will send this out in tomorrow's recap with the information where slides can be found as well as
Sierra,
recording.
Can I just say, if you want to ask me about the HR programs at Sonoma State, please use this email, the Sonoma email. If you have questions that relate to my work in general or any personal questions, if you're interested in having me do a workshop in your company, those kinds of things, please use the craignathanson@gmail.com.
Okay, so we'll send out, I'll follow up with you and we'll send out both.
Yeah.
We do have one more question that came in. How do you coach in dynamics where there maybe is attitude or a lack of willingness to engage positively?
You can't give up. I don't think there's anyone that doesn't appreciate help. But when there's not trust between two people, I'm not saying that there's not, it's very possible for people to shut down. So I think you have to build that trust. The short answer is don't give up. If a person is resistant to coaching, give them some time, but don't give up. It's like if you have a child, right? You're not going to give up on your child. So I say don't give up. No one wakes up on, what's today? Today's Tuesday. No one wakes up on Tuesday and says to themselves, today's a good day to really mess up at work because, I haven't done that yet. We all get up with hope, with wanting to have a good day, to have good relationships, to feel good about ourselves. And then something in the system is broken. There's not bad people, there's bad systems. And we have to great leaders work on the system. And so I would say don't give up on people.
Okay. Okay, I think, I'm getting a couple more. Let's see if there's a couple more in the chat. Okay, a lot of people excited about part 2. So yes, we will be sending out all of that information by tomorrow. You'll get information on the slides, the recording, as well as signing up for part 2 of the presentation. It'll all be made available. So no worries there. Yeah, and now we're just going to say thank you. So thank you so much. I know a lot of people have been chiming in that they're so appreciative for this content today. I think it's just such an important topic. So we really want to thank you for being with us today. Be sure to join us for that next session in the series. So again, he will be joining us again. So that second session that he mentioned a little bit will be the 28th, starhr.com/webinars, probably where you signed up for this webinar. So be sure to join us, and thank you so much for being with us today. And we will see everybody next time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Be well.